previous movie had a lot of visual effects, and I was surprised for it being a lower budget indie film.
Uh-huh.
With it seemed like the entire movie was visual effects, and I was really impressed by that.
Okay, as far as far as whether it's a high budget or low budget, that depends on who's writing the checks. So, I'll tell you what you thought was a low budget. No, yeah, it's kind of a high budget. The effects do cost something, and yeah, it cost me and Michael, money to do that. Um, Michael Iverson is just absolutely amazing with the CGI effects. And what was weird is when I started the film The Rover, I only approached him to do two scenes that were kind of questionable. Like I don't know how I'm going to do this, so I think I would have to rely on CGI. And then he kind of went, sure, I can do that. And then like two scenes turned into four, and then we said, well, let's to blend them a little bit so it doesn't have that sci-fi channel look to it. We added something what was called a toon filter, which made it gave the film kind of a quasi-animated look. And the reason for that is it took the live-action characters and slightly animated them to a level, but then we made the visual effects rise up to a level so it met somewhere in the middle. So a lot of the things that people thought were effects were actually real, and some of the people thought were real were actually effects. I think one of the biggest compliments I got on that movie, there was a part where the main character, Nick, played by Jonathan Sartell, was running, and he was watching a plane land on a runway, and the plane lands. And when people saw that in the film, they asked me, well, how long did you have to wait there for a plane to just come to that runway and land? And no, that runway was abandoned for about 20 years. That the airplane was totally CGI, and people thought it was real. Obviously, where people know it's fake is like we can't blow cars up on the street. The police might have an objection to that. So things like that you have to CGI, and usually things involving aircraft, like the Silver Skyliner airplane was totally CGI. But the visual effects also take a while to do, especially if like Disney can pop them out because they have a whole studio behind them. So they have hundreds of computers where each people work on a little tiny piece of the scene, and then they blend it all together. Whereas the Rover, it was really only Michael Iverson doing the visual effects, and he rose to the level of something like a Marvel Pictures would just by himself. But there was the time issue where we only had one computer, so it took a lot longer than we were expecting for that to happen. But the results kind of speak for themselves. Now with this film, I kind of wanted to step back from the visual effects because I felt, I already did that, and I just didn't want to repeat the same thing again. But there are visual effects in this film, but it's just not going to be every single frame. Was there in the Rover? I don't think there was a single scene where there wasn't a visual effect. Oh, actually, I think there was one. There was a drone shot of a car pulling into a farm. That was the only one that wasn't touched by a visual effect. Every other scene was in the film. If we used a drone shot and everything was small, it worked. But every other scene used a visual effect.
When dealing with visual effects like that, how is dealing with the render times? From what you told me, some of the sequences actually took a long time to render. Like, is that something that filmmakers should be aware of?
Absolutely, should be aware of that. When you come up with these scenes, if you don't have the time or the computing power, try to go with something else. There was a scene, the car chase scene, in the Rover, where the Mustang passes a couple of trucks, performs a pit maneuver on a car, spins them out, and they all hit each other. That whole sequence was 30 seconds long, and it took a month and a half to render. So these are things that you'd have to think of, because that was fully 3D rendered. There are other scenes like where you're still using CGI, but you're using a 2D background, like the scene with the Eiffel Tower in the Rover. Obviously, we didn't travel to France, and that location in Paris doesn't actually exist. You can't get that view of the Eiffel Tower from where they were standing on a balcony. That was a 2.5D, and so that came up. That was rendered a lot. I think that probably only took a couple of days for him to do that. And then they took the 2D image and retreated the film like it was on a screen and matted it to the 2D image and actually rotated to give the effect that it was in 3D and the camera was doing an arc around there, which it really wasn't doing. If you look closely at the film, you can actually tell it's not really a 3D image, but your eye catches it as that when you watch it initially.